Welcome back. We are now heading to the next session of our day 2 of GTAC Winter School 2022. I hope you enjoyed your lunch or whatever you had during the time that you were having it. Please tell us, what did you have, by the way? We didn't mark the register today. Tell us where you're joining from and what did you have during the short break that we had now. You can drop in the chat box there so we could get to know who's with us and where you are joining us from, to ensure that we are still with you throughout the session. And we do hope that you did complete the poll as we requested to give evaluation of the previous session. If you haven't done so, please be so kind and complete the poll. I'm still Vusi Maupa, and I'm here at the Visual Production Studios in Midrand. Moving to the next session now. Not going to do the session. I'm going to hand it over to someone who's capable and will take us through and tell us a little bit more what the session is all about and what we should expect. And with that, she'll also introduce her panel of the facilitators and how the process and the session will progress. Those of you that have attended winter school before may recognize the face, but if you don't, probably if you've read some of the public management or governance work, you've seen the name Professor Geci Karuri-Sebina. Professor Geci Karuri-Sebina, she's with the Vets School of Governance as an associate professor there. And just a bit about her, Geci is a scholar, a practitioner based in Johannesburg, working in the international or intersection between people, place, and technological change. She is currently a visiting associate professor, as I said, at Vet School of Governance, where she is coordinating the establishment of the new Tayarisha, I hope I got that right, Tayarisha African Center for Excellence in Digital Governance, and hosting the African Civil Tech Innovation Network. Prof Geci is also an adjunct professor at the University of Cape Town's African Center for Cities, associate of South African Cities Network, and global faculty member with Singularity University of the Future of Cities and Governance. All right. One more thing about the Professor Geci, that she is recognized and published in the field of development planning policy, foresight, and innovation. And he is involved in editorial roles in several editing or leading journals in the field of or leading journals in the field of innovation and the futures. She has previously worked or held position at the South African Cities Network, the South African National Treasury, the Council for Scientific Research and Human Sciences Research Council, and the UCLA Advanced Policy Institute. Joining me live on stage is our own Professor Geci Karuri-Sebina. Professor, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for having me, Vusi. I'm losing trust, though. I thought we agreed no bios.
I had to. I mean, look, we could look you up online. I know there's information, but I had to pay my respect because your bio is so important to me and it's so heavy that it needs to be communicated out there. Thank you so much for joining us, and handing over the session to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, participants. It's really pretty amazing to see so many people out there engaging with the content at these winter schools. It's not our first rodeo joining these winter schools. And I think they're a really important opportunity for people who, I think have the aptitude, the interest to engage in thinking about public economy, but also learning from the experience of so many practitioners and experts. So I hope you're all enjoying it. So I've been participating since yesterday, and as we talk about these issues of municipal infrastructure and service delivery, what might be occurring to many of you out there is really the complexity of it all. And you're hearing people refer to the systemic issues that are coming up, the complex issues that are coming up. And frankly, it can be quite overwhelming because everybody's raising so many challenges, everybody's view on what the solutions might be, what the opportunities might be, but it's a lot. I think if I can put it that way. So what we wanted to do with the most of the rest of today is to find a way for you to begin and having some tools, if you want, for how you can make sense of this and how you might engage meaningfully and maybe more analytically, which is what students I think ought to be doing with some of this content. Many of you will have heard the story, the parable of the blind Indian men and the elephant. And I won't repeat the whole story, but as it goes, the blind men touch different parts of the elephant and describe it as they experience it from their limited vantage. So if you touch the tail, you think it's like a snake. If you touch the tusk, you think an elephant is a spear. If you touch the leg, you think an elephant is a pillar, and so on and so forth. The story ends badly with all of them fighting because they disagree on what an elephant actually is. The reason I raise that in this way is as we think about systems, and especially these complex municipal, national systems of infrastructure and service delivery, it's very possible and very easy to land in that same trap of thinking that because you're an economist, because you're a planner, because you're a finance person, because you're whatever, that you've understood the issue from your disciplinary or your institutional perspective. And I think what we wanted to identify is there's a methodological issue there and also a systems challenge, because these things are complex systems. And I think without just leaving you to be discombobulated with all of these things you're hearing, we wanted to say, okay, how do we also, given that we are training here, how do we also learn by doing? How do we also find some tools, some methodologies that help us make sense of some of what we're hearing, and also make sense from the perspective of your different places of practice and how you might engage with the systems over time. So I'm very pleased to have with us today for the next couple of hours 3 people who are going to help us on this voyage, and I'm going to introduce them all. My job is actually really easy because I get to introduce them and then to experience it along with you. The first is our facilitator for the session, so Mr. Samuel Njenga, who is the Director for Systems Thinking Africa. And Sami was actually referred to us and highly recommended, I must say, by colleagues from Stellenbosch University with the Center for Complex Transitions or Complex Systems in Transition, because we were looking for somebody who could assist us with some kind of systems thinking, systems analysis, and everybody felt that he would be an excellent guide for us through this journey. Sami has been a visiting faculty member at several top business schools in South Africa. He's currently doing his PhD on learning in the workplace, and he's really eminently experienced, as you'll see from his bio, to really take us through this learning journey into how we can use systems thinking tools to begin to analyze a little bit of what we'll be hearing today. Assisting Sami in that are also 2 additional case study inputs, as you'll have seen on the agenda. And the reason we do that is to say, well, it'll be easier to probably go through the learning journey if we have some common reference points and we're not just all over the show, right? So we'll have 2 case study presentations today. We think that they are rich case studies that show some of the realities of what happens on the ground in projects, and we'll be able to work analytically with these. The first presenter, Eugenie Ninam, is a former colleague from our Climate Treasury. I'm really pleased, Eugenie, that you've accepted the invitation. She is the Director for Investment Planning at the Neighborhood Development Partnership Program at the National Treasury. When we first worked together, I think over a decade ago, she was a planning consultant with National Treasury, and we were working then, as she is now, on issues of township development. So I'm very appreciative that we will have her 20 years plus of experience working in both public and private sectors as she shares a case study from the perspective of their work. And thank you for that, Eugenie. Eugenie will be followed by Eldred Eiteller, who is the new Chief Executive Officer for, I don't know how to pronounce, I should have asked in advance, Kakandu. I'm not sure.
I think it's
No, yes, development agency. Sorry, Eldred. I think you'll correct me on that one. But Eldred and I interacted in his 2 previous professions, both at the Buffalo City Metropolitan Development Agency, so the development agency in BCM, as well as the development agency in Nelson Mandela Bay, where he has really been leading important work areas around development facilitation, local development, safety and peace through urban upgrade. And I can really attest to his description of himself as a academic after decades of having worked with him and really seeing his deep commitment, I think, not just to practice, but also to doing the intellectual work behind it and really to trying to improve, if you want, public sector attention to issues of development. So thank you as well, Dr. Eldred, for accepting the invitation. I think without further ado, we're going to hand over to Sammy, who will lead in with some concepts and some ideas about what we're talking about when we talk about systems thinking approaches. We'll then go into the case studies and then have some interactive work. I encourage you to stay. I think you'll find this interesting and I think a useful addition to what you've been doing, which is listening to people present things. I think this will be an opportunity for you to actually interact a little bit more directly with that content. So I think with that, Vusi, I will hand over to Sammy online. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Geci. Thank you. And good morning, everybody. I hope you are all well and we can interact very well on this session. Really, just a joy to be interacting together across different different barriers that we've been used to, geographical and so on. But now we are able to talk to each other even from different places. So really glad to be here together with you. And thank you, Geshi, for the lovely introduction as well. I'm coming to you from Limpopo, from Polokwane, where we're working together with on a GTAC project, which is around infrastructure delivery. It's around infrastructure delivery, and that's what we've been talking about from this morning around the question of infrastructure delivery and the challenges around it. And one of the experiences we have found in working with infrastructure delivery, and I think it was mentioned even this morning, is the whole question about the lack of spending around infrastructure projects and so on. And traditionally, what we have done with that is we've thrown in technical expertise. So, for example, you throw in engineers, you throw in quantity surveyors, you throw in architects and that kind of thing. So you keep throwing expertise, technical expertise. But what the realization was that while the spending in terms of professional fees was going higher, the reality on the ground was very different. And so GTAC, in its wisdom, together with others, came around and said, maybe we need a different approach to this. We need to understand how do we unlock, how do we unblock the service delivery at a large system scale? What else needs to be in place apart from technical expertise? And so my area is actually around systems. I'm a student of systems thinking, and my area is around change management. So it's trying to address how do we use change, how do we approach the people call them the more softer issues? How do we approach those kind of things? And today, as we were listening to the conversations that were going on, I'm sure some of us were sitting there thinking, oh goodness, the complexity around this. Now, can I start you? Geshe was talking about the people, the Indian people who went to see the blind people who went to see an elephant. Can I start you on something like that? Where for me it's been a very interesting experience in some of the government departments that I've been working with here. When you get to the door, there are security guards and a number of security guards, and one of the things that they all look for is they look for the laptop. Okay, they look at the laptop. Okay, and they look at your laptop and they want to see the serial number. They want to see the serial number of your laptop. So you record it as you enter into the office block, your serial number of your laptop. They don't ask anything else, and you record it in a book and you go in. And at 4 or 5, when you come out, they want to see the serial number of the laptop. Now, I have tried to think to myself, what purpose is this system serving? Now, and to test it, I actually brought routers. I brought a small printer, but I had the laptop. So they ask me for the serial number for the laptop and they record it. I go in with routers, I go in with printers. I've even gone in with a second laptop. Okay, with a second laptop. They don't really worry about that. They want to see, so you don't show them that, you just show them the one laptop. And the one laptop, they look at the serial number and they record it. And when I come out, nobody worries about whether I'm carrying a printer, I'm carrying a router, I'm having another laptop. They want to see where is the laptop that you registered. Now, you can help me on the charts there if you want to, because I sit back and I think to myself, what purpose is this system serving? Now, and is it serving the purpose for which it was designed? What purpose is it actually serving? Now, we could be very pessimistic around it and so on, and talk about maybe it is serving the purpose of employment creation or other things like that. But it's puzzled me. It's really puzzled me. And you see where we put effort into something that maybe was well intentioned when we put it, but as time has gone on, other things have happened, have changed, but we have not adjusted our processes, our ways of thinking in line with the changes around us. So in this particular session, what we're going to be talking about is, I'm going to just do a very high level, high view around systems thinking as a way of looking at complex situations, as a way of looking at messiness, as a way of looking at the kind of complex situations we've been talking about today. So we look at systems thinking as a way, as a lens of looking at that. Now, I'm not going to do justice to the concept of systems thinking. I'm assuming you know a lot about it, or you know enough about it. And if you don't, at the end, we can engage in other circles. But I think from this morning, one of the things we've been hearing over and over and over again is the question of complexity. And just again, she just mentioned it now, even as we were talking, the question of complexity. So let me just take a little moment to talk about this idea of complexity and what is it that we are talking about when we talk around complexity. Now, when we talk around complexity, especially when we talk about complexity in complexity theory, it is the interaction of what are normally independent small elements, and they interact together to create something that is actually much more elaborate over time, much more sophisticated over time. And if you look, so for example, we talk about the starlings, the birds that flock, and you see them doing all the nice dances together. They don't collide. How come they are doing that? These are small independent elements that are interacting together. They organize and reorganize themselves. And in fact, a lot of studies have shown that those birds actually respond to they look at their 7 nearest neighbors. And as long as they look at their 7 nearest neighbors, they don't collide. So that's basically what makes this very complex behavior of the starlings in the evenings and the mornings and so on. It's just by taking small little steps of the 7 neighbors next to me, and by looking at them, the whole thing becomes almost like it has a life of its own. And so we talk about a complex adaptive system as a system in which a perfect understanding of the individual parts does not automatically convey an understanding of the whole's behavior. Now let me try and get this a little bit closer to us. I have wondered as a student of systems thinking whether there is actually a third force, okay? And people, I'm sure in the room, are better placed to tell me whether there is a third force in some of these things that we have seen, like the protests. Last year, July, I had just had a bad bout of COVID. I was in ICU for 6 weeks. And so I was sitting there watching on the screen all the protests that were happening in the different places. And there was always a discussion around the third force, and maybe we will get to hear that there was a third force. I don't know. But when I looked at that and listened to different interviews as they interviewed different people across the country, one lady who was caught looting, when she was interviewed, I remember that interview very well. She said, she was asked, why are you looting? She said, I saw people getting free food. I saw people getting free food. So there was nothing in those statements of the people that they were interviewing that, especially towards the end, that had anything to do with the former president going to jail. It was, I looked, I saw, nothing happened to them. They went home with grocery. And so I thought, well, why not? In other words, it may be that at the very beginning, there was somebody who instigated and said, let's go. But as time continued on, this whole behavior got into a life of its own, and it became more and more and more and more elaborate and more sophisticated. Give you another example. What happens in traffic in the morning? You're driving in traffic in the morning, and you see, oh, the robots are not working and there's huge traffic. I've got a meeting or I need to catch a flight. You decide, all right, let me go to the yellow lane. So you go to the emergency lane, and the rest of us look and see what happens to them. They go right through to the robot. Nobody's watching, is stopping them, and they make it through. The second person decides, if that one went through, I'm sure I can go through. They go to the yellow lane and they go through. After the second or the third person, guess what? It's like a message has been sent to the other drivers that this is now a legal and proper process. Everybody now starts jumping to the yellow lane. Nobody stood there telling people, come to this lane. So there was no really third force. The third force was that the behavior, the system itself adapted. It became a complex adaptive system, and it adapted itself, and that behavior becomes extremely difficult to manage. So look at protest, look at students protesting, look at communities, and you will see the same kind of behavior. Look at war in places like Somali and so on. I'm originally from Kenya, and so I know our neighbors Somali. And you look at something like that, and you realize that while at the beginning there may have been somebody who instigated and said, let's go, as you continue on, it's not necessarily the case. It's like the system, that entity has become a life, has gotten a life of its own. So this factor of complexity is an important one when we are looking at service delivery, because it starts to explain some of the behaviors we see, for example, in community protests and so on, when they start to spread around like wildfire and things like that. Now, and obviously we can turn it around and ask ourselves the question, if that's the way the complex adaptive system behaves and spirals downwards, could we work with the same energy and turn it upwards so that it becomes more productive and more helpful for the community or the places we are in? So I think as we go forward, it's important for this discussion to differentiate a couple of words that are important for me. And the first word I want to talk about is complicated in terms of this conversation, and differentiating that from complex. I've just told you what complex is from a complexity theory perspective. But from a systems thinking perspective, there's also something else. Complexity is around, when we are dealing with human beings, it's also around perspectives. It's around perspectives. So an example I could give is that complicated, an Airbus is complicated. Ben, when I look at those pilots and pressing all the different buttons, it's complicated. But if you've got a brain for it, you can go to school, you can study it, you can know how to manage it. It's complicated. You can break it, you can fix it, you can repair it. It's complicated. Okay, that's complicated. It's something that has got many, many variables, and you can be able to break it, fix it, replace it, and so on. My wife is complex. Okay, my wife is complex. The reason I'm whispering, she's in the room next door, and I don't want to sleep in the dog box. Okay, she's complex. She's complex not just because she's my wife, but I tell you, she's complex. She's complex. What is complexity? I can't, even if I went to school, I can't study her, I can't understand her, I can't break her, I can't fix her, I can't replace her. Even if I got another one, it's not her, it's a different one. So when we talk about complexity as it relates to human beings, it's also about perspectives. Yeah. Now, let me not be deceptive in trying to agree that to say that the two are completely autonomous, they're completely separate. No, no, no. It's very quickly that the complicated becomes complex. Have you seen how quickly a discussion about salt, the food was salty, can lead to divorce? So it was complicated in that it was just about the number of variables, but it can very easily get to the point of, you always make the food like your mother. Like my mother. What about my mother? You don't even know who your mother is. And before you know it, you're spelling the word divorce. So it starts with something complicated, but very quickly it generates into complex. In the province I'm in now, there is a topic or story about something that was complicated, which is about a Zimbabwean who is attending a hospital somewhere and waiting for surgery. Now that's complicated because all we should be talking about is, did you come in legally? Did you what? Do you have the papers? Do you have what? It's complicated, but it just needs one utterance and suddenly it becomes complex. Okay, because it becomes now about perspectives. And that's what then leads to conflict. So, in a short while, we're going to listen to a number of case studies. And to two case studies. And when we listen to these two case studies, I would like you to bear this in mind that unfortunately, for many of us, because of our technical training, because of the schooling, the education system, we tend to spend a lot of our time on the complicated, yeah, the numbers game, the targets, the what, the meeting, the deliverables, the frameworks, the policies. We tend to spend a lot of time on the complicated and we miss out on the complex. And if you think about large system failure, if you think about issues, I mean, why is it all not working as we would have wanted it to work? It's not the complicated. The software is very good. The technology is very good. It's the complex. It's about perspectives. So we tend to neglect the complex. We spend a lot of our time on the complicated, and yet it is the complex that really determines the success of what we are doing. So yeah, ultimately, because of that, we end up with this scenario. And again, when you'll be listening to the different presentations, the two case studies, and the presentations we've been hearing, this is a nice picture to keep in mind that we what has happened with our approach to dealing with complex situations, to dealing with messy situations, is that by and large, we've developed these silos, the silo mentality of we are fine as long as it's not in my yard, I don't care, throw it out there, they should be able to know what to do with it, and our municipality is fine. So let's send them back, let them go to where they belong, we are okay. The problem is not on my side. Yeah. And when the AG comes around, the Auditor General, and presents a report, I just check to see, was my unit or my team fingered out? If it's not, I don't really care. It's not mine. We are fine. We are safe. And so this idea of this silo mentality has become our nemesis, has become our pain, even as we work with complex situations. So I put in a thought here from Russell Ackoff, who says, we are attempting to deal with problems generated by new age with techniques and tools that we have inherited from an old era. That by and large, our problem is we have inherited ways of thinking based on the industrial era that are very mechanistic, that are about divide, that are about cause and effect, that are about a focus. And you hear often in organizations, managers saying, I want you to work like well-oiled machines. Huh? Human beings, well-oiled machines. That's language we took in from the industrial era. And so we work with those ideas that let's do 1, 2, 3. If we've got the proper policy, if we've got the proper policies, if we've got the proper targets and the numbers, we should see this community. We should have done our housing, and our problems around provision of water or housing will be solved. And then we wonder why it is not getting solved. So when we talk around when we talk around this question of complexity, we need to be aware that complexity is not just about complicatedness. It's much more than complicatedness. It's much more than complicatedness. So where does that put us? I want to suggest to us that we are trapped. We are trapped into mechanistic thinking. We are trapped. Sir Geoffrey Vickers was looking at a lobster trap. And what he saw with the lobster trap is they put some fish inside this lobster trap. And when they put the fish in the lobster trap, the fish, the lobster comes, pushes its head inside, gets right in, and then it cannot come out. And what Sir Geoffrey Vickers saw, he was wondering, why is this lobster not coming out? And he realized it's not coming out because it is trapped, not by the trap. The trap did not change. It is trapped by its own thinking. So what we need to be addressing as we listen to the case studies is our own thinking. Where are we caught, for example, into habit traps? We are trapped into ways of doing things because we've always done it this way. We are trapped into victim traps, poor victims. It's interesting just listening to our society and hearing how many of us feel victimized. We are victims. Blame stories, groupthink, activity. Blame stories is there's somebody to blame. Sian van Riebeck. It's COVID. It's somebody. There's somebody out there to blame. Groupthink. We always think the same. Activity traps. Keep people busy on their feet. There's no oxygen left for their brains. And excellence and prior success traps, where we are trapped by our success. What we have done before has become our trapping. So 3 things, and then I'm going to we're going to go into the case studies. So 3 tools we're going to suggest to you to get us out of this trapping. The first one, when you listen to the case studies today, I would like you to draw a rich picture of the situation. So take a blank piece of paper and I would like you to draw. I would like you to draw cartoons, stick figures. So I know normally for many of us, we've been taught into analytical thinking, rational thinking. We're very good with mind maps. I want you to draw cartoons, stick figures. As you listen to the case study, take a blank piece of paper. What are the events? What are the places? What the history? Who are the stakeholders? If you want to take a screenshot of that, you're welcome to. What are the needs? What are the roles? What are the powers? Where do you hear relationships, broken relationships? Where do you hear ethical dilemmas? Where do you hear power plays, conflicts? So draw, right? Now, when you draw, what we are going to do is we've given you, and Marily is going to put on the chat a link where we would like you later to take a picture of your drawing and post it there. And we will take some of them and create a collage to see what you drew. Please don't worry about the drawing. Even if you draw human beings looking like cows, it doesn't matter. The whole idea is to depict the story using drawing. So don't worry too much about the accuracy of your drawing. Very few words, but rather draw. We want to engage with a different side of your brain. So that's the first thing. We want to understand interrelationships through rich pictures by drawing. The second thing we are going to ask you to do as you listen to the case study is to think about stakeholding voices. Okay? Is it 4 or is it 3? Churchman says, a systems approach begins when first you see the world through the eyes of another. A big challenge we fall into, a big major problem we fall into is when we have these different stakeholders with different stakeholding interests and needs, and they are not listening to one another. No one is listening to each other. So listen to who are the beneficiaries of this intervention. Who are the possible victims, quote unquote? people who are benefiting from the current situation, but who are likely to feel victimized? Who are the sponsors, owners? Who are they? Who are the voices of expertise who are providing the knowledge, the history, the information? And then number five, who are the guardians, the legitimizers, those who speak on behalf of others, like unions, like councillors, like traditional leaders? Where do you hear some of it? So as you listen to the case studies, I would like you to listen to the different voices. So the first thing you're doing is drawing. And as you draw those voices as you hear them, and listen to these five voices where you hear them, where they're hearing one another. And then the last thing that we are going to do is, as you listen to that, and we are going to go into breakaway sessions, we are going to do what is referred to as boundary critique. Boundary critique is to critique our own assumptions as we look at the situation. So we're looking at our own blind spots. We are looking at our own unintended consequences. So listen to the story, engage with it. If it was possible, we had helicopters, we would have taken you there to go and actually feel there and hear and smell and taste. But now we're going to do something close to that, where we're going to listen to these case studies, and we are using a systems thinking lens. So let me put it this way: the systems are not out there, the systems are in our minds. The systems are the lenses we are using to look at complex, messy situations. So that's what we are going to do. Okay, so we're going to go into case studies. We're going to listen to two case studies, and we are putting on lenses of a systems thinking approach to listen to where do we hear the interrelationships, where do we hear the different stakeholding voices, interests, and also what could be some of our own blind spots as we listen to these, where do we hear unintended consequences. After the case studies, we are going to go into a break session, which will give you time to upload your drawings. Okay, we give you time to upload your drawings, and then after that we'll go into breakaway sessions and get to discuss some of our findings based on our systems thinking approach. So my facilitator, back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Njenga. That was quite insightful. System thinking. What do you make of it, Prof Geci?
I think it's wonderful, and I'm sure it's going to be useful for us to think about our biases and these different lenses. I can't wait to see the pictures.
All right. Do you want to take us to the next session? What's going on?
Yes, so I believe we'll go straight into the case studies. At this point, I believe we are going to leave this stage and enter a new session. So colleagues, please, with no time wasting, let's jump into the next session and start hearing these cases. Get your piece of paper. Let's get ready to draw.
Sharp, sharp.